How much would you be willing to pay to punish someone who was freeloading from the common pool of resources? What if it cost you the same amount to reward someone else who's contributing his or her fair share? What's best for me if I want to maximize my share of the common pool, contributing or not contributing, punishing freeloaders or rewarding contributors, knowing that others can punish or reward me too? These are the kinds of questions participants face in playing public goods games, the classic way to study problems of cooperation and collective action. Now, in a paper in this week's Science, David Rand and colleagues report their results from such a game, but one played with a twist. Participants get to know one another's reputation as freeloader or contributor, punisher or rewarder. In such a game, the team reports, it is in your own best interest and the best interest of the group if everyone rewards people who do their part for the common good and not punish, but simply not reward those who don't. The research suggests that cooperation in such settings, where reputation is at play, is best supported by positive or rewarding interactions with others. I spoke with Rand from his office at Harvard University.
In this study, we looked at the relative effectiveness of reward and punishment for motivating individuals to contribute to the group and to do things that are costly for themselves but beneficial to everyone in the group that they're involved in. And what we found is that when you give groups the option to either reward or punish, rewarding is much more effective than punishing for encouraging people to contribute to the group in repeated settings, and groups that use reward got significantly higher payoffs than groups that punished. And I should say that this is all in the context of behavioral economics laboratory experiments. So people were interacting in groups for money, where the amount of money that they got paid for participating depended on their actions in the game. So in this study, punishing means I pay a cost for you to incur a cost. And rewarding is I pay a cost for you to get a benefit. So in punishing, we both lose out, whereas in rewarding, on average, if I reward you and you reward me, then we're both better off than if neither of us had done anything.
If you scratch my back, I scratch yours is better for everybody.
Exactly. And everybody's back is nice and scratched.
Is it this reward component that distinguishes your team's study from previous studies on public cooperation? Yes.
So the vast majority of the experiments on what can encourage people to contribute to the public good, as it's called, focused on the role of punishment and showing that people were willing to incur costs to punish people that were free riding and not contributing, and that this in turn made people willing to contribute. And so in our paper, we felt that rewards had been severely neglected, and also that a lot of previous experiments had been set up in such a way that was not really realistic and that hurt the ability of rewards. So in our study, we looked at repeated interactions where the same groups interacted again and again in a way that everyone knew who was playing the game and who had done what. And we found that in that setting, rewards worked just as well or better than punishments.
Meaning that lack of reward would not possibly be seen as a punishment itself?
Right. So I think that's a really good point. In our paper, what we're comparing is a situation where you reward people when they contribute and you deny reward when they don't, is one sort of treatment. And then another treatment is you do nothing when people contribute, or you pay to punish them when they don't contribute. So we are using denial of reward as a form of punishment, but it's not costly to punish the other person. And so if you contribute, then I'll be willing to pay to help you. But if you don't contribute, then I'm just going to leave you alone. As opposed to if you don't contribute, then I'm going to pay to really hurt you.
Now, you said that your study was perhaps more realistic than previous studies on public cooperation. Why does repeated interaction make it more realistic?
Okay, so maybe as opposed to more realistic, what I should say is it reflects a wide range of situations which the previous settings don't. So there are certainly a lot of situations in life that are non-repeated settings, like if you're, waiting in line at the airport, or if you're driving in traffic, you have these sort of one-off kind of interactions with people. But we think that most of your really important interactions, the one that really matter for your life, are repeated interactions with your friends, family, coworkers. And those are the sort of interactions that are the real substance of your life.
So in this game, there's full transparency, a restricted population size, and those who do not behave toward the common good can't simply move off and swindle someone else, if you will.
Right.
What kind of situations might lend themselves toward reward for cooperation rather than punishment or threat of punishment? These everyday interactions that make up most of our lives, you said.
Right. So I think all of these interactions with friends, family members, and coworkers, these people that you see regularly again and again, in those sort of settings where there is reputational effects and there is repetition, our study suggests that you would do well to be nice to the people that are helpful to you, and or to be nice to the people that you see contributing to the group. And then if you see people sort of not doing their part, as opposed to sort of going out of your way to really, hurt them and punish them for it, you should just stop helping them and use sort of denial of reward as an incentive for them to do their part.
Is there any cultural bias here? Were there any instances of anti-social punishment or punishing someone for being too giving and group interested?
So the cultural component of this is extremely interesting. In our study, we only used American college students, which in a paper in Science in, last year, from Simon Gechter's group, they looked at these punishment games across societies and found in places like the U.S. and the UK, almost all of the punishment was directed at free riders that weren't contributing, whereas in some other countries, it was the opposite, that lots of punishment was being directed towards the contributors. And so we saw very little of that in our study, but we think that that's all the more reason that rewards may be better than punishments, which is in cultures other than our own, punishment can be really destructive when it's used, when the low contributors punish the cooperators. But with rewards, there's no such danger of that because, if you have people rewarding each other when they shouldn't, that's, good, really, as opposed to being costly for everyone involved.
Any political or cultural messages, then, in this study beyond that of just those whom you interact with?
That's another really interesting question. With all of these games in the lab, all these public goods games with punishment or reward and these kind of things, for the most part, they're set up in a symmetric way that this is about peer punishment or peer reward as opposed to state punishment or state reward. And in those kind of situations where you have a strong state compared to a weak individual and also a state that makes pre-commitments to how it's going to act by publishing the laws. The sort of state says, if you do this, you will be punished. If you do this, you will be rewarded. Those are sort of major differences from the way that these experiments are set up. And so it's unclear to what extent these results generalize to politics. We are fundamentally evolutionary biologists, and so we do a lot of thinking about sort of early human evolution in small groups where, you're sort of looking at the emergence of cooperation. And so we feel like those are the settings that these are, and, so in those settings, people have evolved certain preferences for how to respond to different motivations. And then when they come into the lab in the modern day, we use the lab as a way to sort of get a snapshot of those preferences. But the question of how these generalize to larger institutions is an open question that we're pursuing in current research.
The idea then that these social behaviors, this group cooperation, might not be a learned behavior, but perhaps an evolutionarily selected one?
Right. I mean, this is a fundamental idea in a lot of evolutionary biology, that this ability to cooperate and work together brings great benefits to societies that have it and to individuals that successfully engage in cooperation. And so this is the question of how this behavior could have evolved, given that evolution is very selfish and, sort of favors those who do what's in their own interest. It raises a great question of how this seemingly altruistic and cooperative behaviors could emerge.
David Rand, thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot.
David Rand of Harvard University is lead author of a paper on how positive interactions promote public cooperation.